I think that watercolor pencils are easier to use than watercolors, and they are way faster than colored pencils, and this alone justifies trying them at least once if you haven't. So in this video, I'm going to paint this snowman and demonstrate watercolor pencil techniques that look more like watercolor and techniques that look more like colored pencils. Of course, you can use these techniques separately or use them in combination to one another to create fun and unique art. Hi, I'm Françoise. Welcome back to my channel. The first technique that I want to share with you is the swatch technique, or at least is what I call it. To execute that technique, just grab a piece of watercolor paper or a piece of plastic, ceramic, or anything like it, as long as the texture is not completely smooth, because it's going to be easier to scribble with a pencil of your choice and get some pigment to stick to the surface. I like to wet my palette to make the step even faster, since now you can see that the paint is ready for use, and just like that, we have something that looks like watercolors. Use this technique when you want to paint a large area quickly, like I'm doing here with this background. Also use it when you want to make sure that the paint itself looks smooth on paper, because one of the big downsides of watercolor pencils, and you probably noticed that before, is that they can look streaky even after blending them with water. This really depends on the paper that you're using and how much tooth it has to it, and I'm talking about the little hills and valleys on the surface of the paper. The more tooth, the more streaks. And that's why I prefer hot press or cold press watercolor papers with watercolor pencils. There's also the quality of the watercolor pencils, because low quality pencils also affect the outcome, because they're going to be drier than better pencils and you'll get more streaks. The best brands and types that I've been using and that I can recommend, because they're creamy and high quality, are the Faber-Castell Auberge Dur and the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle pencils. Another technique that I think most people know watercolor pencils for is the color and activate technique. It's another name that I made up, and there are two steps to this, as the name indicates. First, color as you would with colored pencils, and for best results, I like to use a blunt lead, even if it's just a bit blunt. It makes the coloring easier and faster, and less risks of having streaks or indenting the paper. I also press enough to leave pigment on paper, but not too much, and I use elongated circular motions, oval shapes in other words. Use the coloring technique when you want to target a specific area of the painting, and I like it for shapes like this snowman. I like it over the swatch technique here because the only water we'll add is when we activate the pigment, and that results in more vibrancy of color, because remember that the more water that you add, the lighter the paint will look. It's the same for watercolors. Here not only there's no water now, but I can also press more or less hard to deposit more or less pigment, my choice. It is something I couldn't do as easily with the swatch technique. There is less control here. It's also great to get into the nooks and crannies of a drawing and stay precise, which might be more challenging when you don't have a paintbrush with a fine tip. I do have a lot of choice with paintbrushes because I've been painting for over 5 years and I've painted so many things, so many watercolor pencil artworks and also watercolor artworks. But if you only have 1 or 2 paintbrushes like I used to in the beginning, that is going to be pretty useful for you. I also like with that technique that I'm able to place all my colors like I would with colored pencils and really see where the painting is going and how it will look like in the end without having to use water first. And it feels reassuring and relaxing, unlike watercolors, for instance, if you've tried them before, because then you just add a bunch of water, everything is bland, everything just spreads out of control, and you don't really know what you're doing in the beginning. While with watercolor pencils, you know exactly where that drawing is going. Remember, there's a second step to that technique, and it's to activate the paint. And here too, there is no need to rush nor stress, because something about watercolor pencils that few people know and that I've been teaching here on my channel, and that you'll know if you've been watching all my videos on the topic, is that only a little bit of water is needed with this medium in particular. And using just a little bit of water is going to help with keeping control over the drawing. And remember, it also helps with keeping a good vibrancy of color. That's why I use a paper towel all the time to remove excess water from my brush when I activate the paint. And I often rinse the brush and repeat that process, so I don't transfer blended pigment onto a new area. This section by section painting approach can feel reassuring, as you can see, and added to the swatch technique, I think you can begin to notice how much is possible with watercolor pencils, how many subjects you can tackle with a background, without a background, full landscapes, portraits. You can literally paint and draw anything. So remember that the swatch technique is better for backgrounds, for large washes of paint that you want to cover quickly, while the color and activate technique is much better for targeted areas and shapes. There are 5 more techniques that I want to demo here next. So if so far you feel like you've learned a lot, please leave a comment below that says something like more watercolor pencil, and I'll know to make more videos like these. Also, check out the link to my Patreon in the description of the video, as I shared the full tutorial for this in real time, and I also recapped these techniques there. And I have over 30 watercolor pencil, Inktense, and water-soluble pencil tutorials that you can subscribe to for a small monthly fee, or purchase as a one-time package if all you're interested in is watercolor pencils. Another fun watercolor pencil technique that you can use is to wet the lead of a pencil with a paintbrush and just get the paint from there directly. Be careful when you do this to only wet the lead and avoid that wooden part. A tad of water on the brush is enough again. And I like to mix colors on the spot by wetting 2 leads one after the other. That's really easy to do. And as you can see, it works really well for quick and small touches of paint. It's very easy and fast for me to create a new color, brown, for example here, out of 3 different leads. It takes seconds and it's completely mess-free. And that makes watercolor pencils convenient to use in the most inconvenient of places. You could imagine using them in an airport, a plane, a trip where you can't have much with you because all you really need is a little bit of water, a paper towel, some paper. It can even be coloring paper, that works too, as long as it's not too thin. It's a little bit thick. There are some great coloring books out there. Or watercolor paper, and that's it. You're all good to go. I love to use light pencils to burnish targeted areas in my paintings, and the burnishing technique is a very famous colored pencil technique that you can use with watercolor pencils because it helps smooth out the looks of a drawing by applying a lighter color on top of what was already done. Usually it's going to be white or another very light color. And you do that with enough pressure to flatten the tooth of the paper and get rid of the last little white specks in the paper and just mix the color a little bit better on the spot with your light lead. I use other colors sometimes that are a little bit stronger if I want to alter the original color that's on paper. And it's what I did here with the hat, first with yellow, and then I increased the white by using my white pencil. But I also burnished dark parts so they look like a lighter gray now. This is really effective to add depth and realism, and this hat is a great example of it. Another example I can give you that I could see done with is painting fabric. After painting the main color of the fabric and adding the shadows to shape those creases, we could use the burnishing technique to add the highlights and really finish shaping that fabric in a piece of clothing or whatever it is you want to paint. Another fun and really quick technique that you can use and that I've been using frequently with watercolor pencils is just use a dry lead on wet paper. So just wet your paper first and stick the lead onto it. The lead will slightly melt on the spot in a matter of seconds and it will leave a lot of paint. It will come out very vibrant and almost opaque. So that's going to be great to add detail that stands out. I would only use this towards the end of a painting, however, because pigment is going to be very strong here. It's the kind of addition that will be very hard to remove if you change your mind. But you can see how quickly I'm able to shape dark dots here, so that's super effective. Not a technique per se, but just notice how easy it is to layer with watercolor pencils, using the swatching technique or even the color and activate technique. If the paper is sturdy enough, the pencils are good quality enough, that is going to be no different than any other quality art supply. You can layer all you want and you can build realism little by little if that's your thing. This technique that I'm going to demo now is not well known and I'm probably not the first human on earth to use it, but I came across it by chance while I was experimenting and haven't really seen it anywhere else. And you'll just need sanding paper or something similar and scrape pigment off of a pencil like this. Then you pick it up with your finger and you can apply it on your painting. So I use this for final touches in small areas. And I really like it to add a different kind of texture than anything else that I've shown here. I got into the habit to use it for cheeks, and I've done it before in an older video here, and it was very pretty, so I thought I would use it again with my snowman. What I like about that technique in particular is that you can apply it at the very end of your painting with a very light and bright color on top of a darker area without reactivating that paint because it's going to stay dry. And because it's a powder that we're just smoothing out with our fingers, it also appears very smooth in the end with still that little pencil texture that looks kind of cool. Now another fun and quick technique for you that I use all the time in pretty much all my watercolor paintings that's super fun is to dip the lead in water and avoid again wetting the wooden part when you do that. The lead is going to become soft enough that you will be able to deposit thick specks of pigment anywhere. So it's similar to the technique that I showed before where you wet your paper and apply the lead into it, except that here you get to add noticeable touches of paint without disturbing what's already on paper. And when you use that technique, it's going to be helpful to rotate the lead to get all of that pigment off. And then you'll have to wet the lead again when you get to the dry part once more. And I love this technique to add texture. I think it's very unique to watercolor pencils. Usually I use it for highlights, but here I wanted to leverage it for snow and it's so effective. All it takes is a white pencil. That's why I recommend a 24 pencil set, as they normally have one of these when the 12 color pencil sets usually don't. But if you prefer to limit yourself and buy an open stock, I recommend the primary colors or similar colors, yellow, red, and blue, the white pencil for the highlights, and my go-to for the shadows, as you were able to see here, is a water-soluble graphite pencil. These techniques work for watercolor pencils, Inktense pencils, and also all water-soluble pencils, and that's why I love that medium. So I hope you've learned something today and you can give it a go. I suggest this video next if you want to learn more. I have plenty more watercolor pencil videos in my playlist and plenty of Patreon tutorials if you want to practice along with me in real time. So thank you so much for watching till the end and see you next time.